I've been thinking about this video for a while now. Prior to 2020, the Suns were undergoing a 10-year playoff drought. I couldn't care less about them. Sure, I knew Devin Booker was good, but there was no point in watching him if the team sucked. However, everything changed when Chris Paul joined the team. CP3, the great point guard, had never won a title before, or even been to one for that matter. And he chose the Phoenix Suns as a team to help him reach the finals. So in round 1 of the playoffs, the Suns knocked off the Lakers. I mean, this was crazy. The Lakers basically owned the Suns, and LeBron and AD were out. Then they beat the Joker and Paul George, and the only team in their way was Giannis and the Bucks. They would quickly get up 2-0, 2 wins away from their first title. Then, well, you know what happened. The Suns blew the next 4 games, and Giannis won the title. And that was pretty sad. I could have made a video then about the Suns being cursed. I mean, every team the Suns faced that tournament had a key injury, and they still couldn't win it all. But I waited one more year. In 2021, Phoenix had the best record in the league, and they had the best odds of winning it all. In round 2, they played Luka Doncic and the Mavericks, and were up 2-0 again. But guess what? Surprise, they blew it. So this led to a Game 7 at home to reach the next round. Who knew what was gonna happen? I mean, every home team had won at that point, so the odds were definitely in the Suns' favor.
And the ball's gonna be in Luka's hand 80 to 85% of the time. Here's the step back by Luka. Doncic, 3,
his game that gives him comfort.
Doncic. 27-point lead. Down goes Johnson.
Well, this was probably the most embarrassing moment as a Suns fan. I mean, in the first half alone, Luka scored more points than the Suns combined. The game was basically a 40-point home blowout. This is Game 7 of the season on the line, and Phoenix played as if they quit. Again, I could have made a video, but I gave it one more year. So now it's 2022. Phoenix just made a blockbuster trade for Kevin Durant. They were definitely odds-on favorites to win the title that year. They had KD, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker, 3 Hall of Famers. They reached the second round and faced the 1-seed Denver, where they forced a Game 6. In their chance to tie the series, at home, the Phoenix Suns got down 80-50 at halftime. There have been 4 times in NBA history when a team was down by at least 30 points in an elimination game. The Suns have 2 of those, in consecutive years at home. A normal team would lose by 5-10 points in a Game 6 at home. You know, respectable efforts. But Phoenix, they lose by 30. So you know what? I'll say it. The Phoenix Suns are the most cursed franchise in NBA history. It's been over 50 years since the Suns were established. Over those long years, Phoenix has held some incredible teams, yet they have lost all 3 of their championships. It all started in 1968 when Phoenix received their first professional sports team. Of course, Phoenix struggled in their early years. They ended 16-66 in their inaugural season, the worst in the NBA that year. However, having a bad record came with its benefits. In the offseason, they were gonna get the first overall pick. But back then, the first overall pick was settled by a coin flip, so the Suns had to face the Milwaukee Bucks, another expansion team, for the best player in that draft. And the Suns lost the coin flip, so they took Neil Walk of Florida. There's a reason why you've never heard of Neil Walk in your life. But Milwaukee, well, in the first pick, they would take a 7'2" center out of UCLA, a monster scorer and 6-time champion, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem is currently the 2nd all-time leading scorer in league history, just behind LeBron. So Phoenix could have had one of the best players ever, but that's okay. I mean, they made the 1970 playoffs, and blew a 3-1 lead. In 1976, the Suns made a surprising playoff run to the finals. With players such as Paul Westphal, Alvin Adams, and Dick Van Arsdale, the Suns battled the Celtics in the finals. By then, the Celtics had won 12 finals already, and the Suns were just 2 wins over 500. They were the obvious underdogs, but a sliver of hope appeared when the series was tied at 2-2. Game 5 was in Boston, and this roller coaster ride of a game went into triple overtime. The Suns were down by as much as 18 in the first half, but brought themselves back in it.
Again, 3 seconds, Hondo off the glass, he's got it with a second! Won't start until it's touched, they'll have to throw it up. Garherd, turnaround, shot in the air, it's good! It's tied again! I don't believe it! Garfield Hurd at the buzzer!
In the second overtime, Paul Westphal purposely called a timeout they didn't have. That set up the Garfield Hurd buzzer beater to tie up the game. But in the third overtime, Boston was too much in the end. Considered as the greatest playoff game ever played, the Suns were the losers. Over the next 8 years, Coach McLeod would lead Phoenix to multiple winning seasons, but they never seemed to get over the hump. They were even at one point 1 game away from the finals, but the Sonics won Games 6 and 7 in dramatic fashion. In the 80s, the NBA would become much more competitive. The Phoenix Suns had good teams with Walter Davis and Tom Chambers, but they never kept up with the rest of the league. The LA Lakers basically owned them that decade, knocking them out 4 times. In the late 80s, the Suns basically fell off the face of the earth. Bad management, bad records, and scandals came along. And in 87, 3 players on Phoenix's roster were accused of drug trafficking. Their star player, Walter Davis, even testified against his own teammates on the drug abuse. The Phoenix Suns turned into complete turmoil, and their reputation was impacted for the worst. "1988 is when things finally went well in the desert. The Suns drafted Kevin Johnson, a great player known for dunking over Hakeem. With many more additions under Colangelo's team, this offensive powerhouse made 13 consecutive postseasons. 1989. Phoenix breezed past their opponents, but then they had to face the Lakers. We all know LA owns the Suns, so they got swept. At that point in history, when Phoenix faced the Lakers in the playoffs, they won 6 games and lost 23. But some way, somehow in 1990, Phoenix finally beat LA in 5 games. The team that held the Suns from championship contention for so many years was now eliminated. But then Kevin Johnson got injured and they lost. 1991, a loss to the Jazz. 1992, the Trailblazers knocked out Phoenix, including a 153-151 loss. 1993, in the offseason, the Suns picked up an all-star power forward by the name of Charles Barkley. Barkley would play the greatest season of his career in '92, winning the MVP award and leading them to 62 wins. It also helped that former player Paul Westphal came back to coach. All of this resulted in likely the most talented squad in Suns history. They beat their opponents and made the NBA Finals that year. However, the only teams standing in their way were Michael Jordan and the Bulls. The Suns were actually favorites over the defending champs. They had the better record. But it's always going to be tough to beat MJ. They snatched 2 wins on the road, but unfortunately, with their season on the line, the Suns lost in a gut-wrenching Game 6. In the final seconds, John Paxson hit a 3-pointer to win the game and the series. Just like that, as one of the winningest teams in the league, Phoenix's title count was still 0. Over the following years, the Suns slowly turned to mediocrity. Barkley would always lead them far in the playoffs, but they'd lose in heartbreaking fashion. In 1994, the Rockets beat them in 7, and a year later they faced again. Up 3-1, Phoenix was looking to knock out the 6th seed, but guess what? It's the Phoenix Suns. Despite being a 1 seed, despite having home court advantage, the Suns would blow the next 3 games. A 3-point dagger in Game 7 proved to be the dagger for Charles Barkley. In the 1996 offseason, he demanded a trade to the Rockets, the same team that crushed his title hopes. The success was now over in Phoenix. Multiple decent players would join the desert: Robert Horry, Sam Castle, Jason Kidd, but Phoenix was simply a team that consistently got bounced in the first round. Then came the 2000s. In this era, Phoenix drafted Amari Stoudemire, Rookie of the Year. They also signed unrestricted free agent Steve Nash, and with Sean Marion the Matrix, it finally looked like Phoenix was good again. In 2004, the Suns tied their best record of 62 wins. But as an offensive powerhouse in the West, how far can they make it?
As the San Antonio Spurs on the road take game one of the Western Conference Finals.
Are just under 2 to play in the fourth. Nowitzki for 3. Yes!
Most of Phoenix's heartbreaking losses so far have been pretty iconic. The triple overtime loss, the John Paxson 3, but the 2006 season may be a bit underrated for Phoenix heartbreaks. 2006 was yet another 60-win season. In fact, there was a stretch where Phoenix won 33 of 35 games in the regular season. This was capped off with point guard Steve Nash winning his second MVP award. The Suns were an absolute powerhouse on the offensive end, but they were pretty lacking on defense. Their series of the Spurs started out promising, but it soon turned a disaster. Steve Nash broke his nose and had to sit out some games. When he returned, Robert Horry would hip check him towards the bench.
Nash in backcourt, and he's knocked hard by Horry and fouled.
Of course, the Suns' bench came to his aid. 2 players, including Amari Stoudemire, came off the bench. But there's a rule that a player can't leave the bench area, even if their teammate did get hip-checked. As a result, Stoudemire, a key player, was suspended. The Spurs easily took the series and soon the title. In a season where Phoenix dominated and should have won it all, they lost in the second round after a nosebleed and some suspensions. That was one of Phoenix's best shots at a title in recent memory. These last few years have been pretty action-packed. There's been a lot of failure, but that can wait for another video. After losing to the Spurs, Coach D'Antoni left the team. That's one gone. Phoenix traded away the Matrix for a rusty Shaq, who accomplished nothing. That's 2. In 2010, the Suns made a bit of a run just to face the LA Lakers. Of course, Phoenix lost. They did put up a good fight, but Kobe was just too much in the end.
Oh, you gotta get a shot here. Final seconds. Bryant for the win. Bang!
Well, now that the season's over, the worst thing Phoenix can do is go on a 10-year drought and lose all their players. And they went on a 10-year drought and lost all their players. Steve Nash is gone, Amari Stoudemire too, and that's 3 and 4. The Suns' 2000s era is now over, so they'll just have to deal with 19 wins in a season. Yeah, this team was so bad that Robert Sarver even threatened to move it. But as we've covered throughout this video, the Suns used to be good. They've compiled one of the best winning percentages in the entire league, records alongside the Celtics and Lakers. But the only thing to show for it are 0 championships and 3 defeats. Phoenix has held some great players, great teams, and great coaches. I mean, there's no way I, as a Phoenix fan, would call them a failing franchise. No, they're not a failure, but they're certainly not a winning franchise either. A team with that much talent should have 3 or 4 championships by now, but instead they have none. There's no other way to describe the Phoenix Suns but cursed.